Hello there and welcome to the Music Minds podcast. My name is Tony Fennell and with me as always is my co-host John Stone. How are you on this chilly evening in New York City, mate?
Oh, it's getting there. I think tomorrow and definitely Wednesday are going to be the coldest, so by the time everyone hears this, it'll be bundled up, hopefully.
Well, you got to get your big coats out the closet, mate.
Exactly.
Today's show is called How, Why, and When Do I Get Paid? I've lost count the amount of times I've been asked, how much do musicians make per album sale? This is a difficult question to answer, my friend, because you have to consider the circumstance. In the case of major record label deals, you have to factor in the recoupment. And in most major and even some indie record labels, they pay an artist in advance that has to be recouped through sales. And it doesn't end there, though. In addition, there are other expenses that factor into how the label is paid back, including marketing, recording studio expenses, paying the producer, paying for tour expenses, the cost of manufacturing each physical copy that is sold, paying for advertising, even down to the stamps that are used to send copies to journalists. And by the way, that last one is no joke, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Not
until each and every one of these expenses you've incurred are recouped, you, the artist, will basically not see a bloody dime. 360 deals, and you like this one, John. 360 deals, which means you're signing lock, stock, and barrel to a production company, may get you closer to recoupment, but these deals can be the kiss of death, as you've essentially got to put all your eggs in one basket and leave yourself with no negotiating room whatsoever. Now, when it comes to putting music out yourself, one of the biggest outlets, iTunes, got a roasting recently by none other than Pete Townsend of The Who. The guitarist recently called iTunes a digital vampire that profits from artists without providing them support. Ouch. But does he have a point? I think he does. Anyway, artists get, and John, you can load in on this when you're ready, mate. Artists get 9 cents for each individual song downloaded on Napster and iTunes. To put that in perspective, musicians need to sell 12,399 songs a month to earn a salary equal to a McDonald's employee. And you've got to think this is the reason why many established artists have yet to succumb to the Apple and Napster financial model and prefer to sell through other venues instead. When it comes to making money from streaming, oh boy, here we go. Well, we've kind of covered this once or twice, but it's a joke. You know, listeners will have to stream an artist's songs over, and this is crazy, over 4 million times on Spotify to earn a monthly salary equal to minimum wage. You know, that's feasible for a small band in Iowa. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
John, what's your take on this? Am I being fair with my assessment that it's stacked in everyone's favor but the artists? I think I'm right, mate.
Well, yes, and we've talked about this a few times when you're talking about your tech companies who basically take music and do whatever they want with it and refuse to pay. You talk about your societies that do great work for you, but if you really try and dig deep and find out exactly where the money is and where it's going and where it's coming from, or if you should decide to take your business elsewhere, all of a sudden they decide, well, we're not going to pay you anymore. So you really are looking at the little guy or the little lady, the little man, a little woman, fighting against the machine, so to speak. And as we talked about in our very first podcast, sometimes that machine is actually called the machine, with Miss Taylor Swift fighting against the big machine. So yeah, when you were talking about 9 cents per unit, now that's just the mechanical rate on the publishing side. Now on the master side, if you should be an independent artist who owns all of your rights and you've uploaded your music to iTunes and they've accepted it and you're out there touring and people are like, oh man, I want to get your stuff, that's great. You send them to iTunes and they could download it and they take 30% off of every sale to keep for themselves. That covers the mechanical fee and that also covers their share of the master side. But guess what, Tony? They're not going to do that anymore. They're going now just to Apple Music, which is streaming only. Now, what did we say? Streaming pays you bupkis. So your 9.1 cents per unit on the mechanical side is now going down to 0.00 whatever, less than nothing per stream. So you can't even get your usual anymore from that. So
no, it's bull, John. And I'll let you carry on. But I must say this, and I want to punch this home. It's a license to print cash.
Yeah, and
Jesus, anybody else would be hung, drawn, and quartered.
Well,
It's
and
mental.
that advance that you're talking about, where you might get that from a record label or whatnot, mind you, that sometimes literally that is the only money some artists will ever see. They'll get that little advance, and believe me, the label and if you're talking about a 360 deal, the entity you're working with, or if it's just a label or if it's a multimedia company or platform, believe me, they're making it hand over fist because they've bought your rights, so to speak, with this little advance. And at the end of the day, that may or may not ever be recovered from them saying, well, now we have to pay for this and we have to pay for that, and that has to be taken out of there too. So there's a couple of when you brought this to me as a topic, Tony, I went and did a little research, of course, and I found two good articles. There was one by Eli Ball of Lyric Financial. That sounds a little specious in my own right, but it's an article on ASCAP from a couple of years ago, and he talks about what the advance is and how it works when you're dealing with a record label. So we'll just delve into that first, and then I do want to also talk a little bit about a 360 deal and just what that entails, because that itself can be something you make your hair fall out. So an advance is a guaranteed amount of money that a label will pay an artist when they sign them, and that artist is then giving them all their rights, generally on the master recording side. If it's a 360 deal, then you would also potentially be giving them your publishing as well, which, as we've said ad nauseum, never do that unless they give you a big pile of cash. So for the advance from a record label, they're basically taking your master recordings, they're giving you an advance, and then that money should be paid back out of royalties. Now, royalties are what they make from every sale, and you have your points on that. Sometimes it can be upwards. You've done this, Tony. What do you usually get for points on an album sale?
Hey, listen, if you walk in there as a heavyweight, you're happy to walk out with 12.
Yeah.
I mean, 12. You're punching.
Now
you're punching. You know, you're a big artist.
Yeah, and that's 12%, people. So each point is a percentage
12%.
point. Yeah, so you're getting 12% off of sales, and that's usually for wholesale. You know, so what you're collecting is a percentage, and if you can get 12, that's pretty darn good. So your royalties come in, and they get recouped against that advance. But the label is also going to say, well, we're paying to promote you, and if we want to send you out on tour, we have to recoup that as well. So you get your little chunk of money, and the expenses against it just keep piling up and piling up. Meanwhile, you never see any more money because that advance it has to be recouped first before they get to what they call the break-even point. So it's really, you're throwing it, down the well, basically, and saying, okay, well, I hope this all works out. And there's other tricks that can be played on you if the album. So here's what happens: an advance amount is guaranteed. You want to make sure that it is guaranteed regardless of your output. Now, what that means is, oftentimes for an advance, they're going to want you to put out more than just one record. Or if you put out a record, then there'll be another advance coming from another record. But if they should suddenly change hands, the company changes hands, they sell out, what have you, and all of a sudden the new management comes in and says, we're not interested in supporting them, we want to go in a different direction, you can actually have your albums, as you know, Tony, shelved, right? And it never gets put out.
Easy come, easy go, and I will point out everything that you just said about the way these deals are structured. Let's not forget, the listening public, a label is a bank. It's a bank loan.
Right.
That's all you're getting. Right. You're getting a bank loan, and they're taking a punt on the fact that you might have a bit of talent. And if you don't, and you don't pay them back, just like any bank loan, they take everything, and you get nothing. And you're right, John. That $10,000 you get in your hands, and you're like, oh my word, it's it. I'm going to a strip bar. Most people don't do that. I'm going out for a meal. I'm going to put some money away. You do this thinking the cash is going to keep coming. Most of the times it doesn't.
Right. Right. And, next thing you know, it's like, wait a minute, I don't have my rights to my masters anymore. And I've burned through my advance, and somehow there's no more money coming in. What's going on here, So an advance will have a minimum delivery requirement. So they're going to tell you, you have to deliver for us 3 or 4 albums. I remember working with an artist one time, and she had already mapped all this out for herself. She said, all right, I'm going to have my 2 albums. I'm going to do my Christmas album. I'm going to do, she was all in line with what she was going to deliver anyway as soon as she made that deal. And I haven't heard from her since, so I can only imagine it didn't.
She's still working on the Christmas album, mate.
She's still working on the Christmas album. She may have to convert to another religion at this point. So you want to make sure that whatever the minimum delivery requirement is, that it's something attainable, and that's not just going to be based upon the whims of management at this label. You want to know that you're going to be able to say, okay, if I deliver these songs to you, and they have to be acceptable to management. If I deliver these to you, I know that we're going to get our next advance for the next album and keep going down the road, or at least know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel as far as recoupment is concerned. So speaking of that word, recoupment, you can also get advances on the publishing side. And as we've talked about before, that's something you really, if you're giving up your publishing to a publisher, you want to make sure that they're going to be doing everything right for you, because that is your bread and butter. A recording is one thing because that's a fixed piece of content, but your composition can be re-recorded, it can be reinterpreted, and if you hold on to those rights, or if you give those to somebody, you want to make sure you're working with a really strong partner, because that is your output. That is the straight out of your brain to the paper, or straight out of your brain to the instrument you're recording and writing on. You want to make sure all of that is taken care of. So when you're doing an advance on publishing, that is also going to basically be based on the same types of things. But sometimes with a publisher, they'll say, well, you worked with this artist, we gave you an advance on this, and it turns out the song didn't go anywhere, it didn't make any money, so we're not gonna count this. We're not gonna put this toward your recoupment and all that sort of thing. So all kinds of things can go wrong,
John, if I can just make a point about that, I remember I signed to Warner Brothers when I was 18 years old. Right. Warner Brothers Publishing, and I thought I was King Kong. I was like, I am the guy. What I didn't realize when I was signing, I had a decent lawyer, and I won't tell you his name because I get into trouble. But I signed this Warner Brothers deal, and I had to have, basically it was 5 songs, and then you move on to the next phase of your deal. Right. Now, what wasn't pointed out to me is, and I was quite a prolific writer at the time, those 5 songs that I had to write were 5 full songs. Now, me writing with you and another guy, and we have a hit, you're thinking, oh, there it is, there's one.
No,
that's
really?
a third of one.
Oh.
That's a third of one. Ooh. Deals have been changing over the years, but that's the deal I signed. And when I eventually signed to Atlantic Records for records, Warner Brothers didn't want to let me go, and Atlantic had to give them the call and say, he's out of that deal, otherwise there's trouble. Right. And, it took a bit of wrangling to get me out. But those are the kind of deals you get thrown into. You think you're going to do well. I got a song, and I got a platinum record from it in England. And I thought, there's one done. It was 1/3 of a full song, and I had to deliver 5 full songs before my next advance came in.
Wow.
You're never going to attain. How are you going to do that?
Constantly moving the goalposts.
So stacked.
Yeah.
Constantly moving the goalposts. And saying that, a lot of times, and you'll know this, it's just the business we're in, right? A lot of times the guy who signed you moves on.
Yes.
Whether it's, the A&R guy who signed you for the record deal, it's like, I love you guys. Before you know it, the guy's moved on to EMI. Or, all of a sudden it's like, hang on, the guy who signed us has gone. The guy who inherits you goes, I didn't sign him.
Yeah, exactly.
They
have their own projects. They have their own projects they want to push. Why am I going to help this guy?
Right, am I going to use the money on those guys who I didn't sign and don't know, or I'm going to use it on my guys that I love and I've just signed? It's catch-22. He's trying to do the right thing. You're sitting there going, now what? I mean, you must have seen this, John, surely.
Oh, sure. And, anybody will come in and say, okay, I have all this music and I want to work with you. And you say, okay, we want to take this in. And, playing, label advocate or publisher advocate here. Yes, because as you say, it's a risk. You're taking on the risk as the label or the publisher to say, we're going to make this song or this artist or this writer successful, and we want to hedge our bets, so to speak, to make sure that we're not going to take a bath on this. At the end of the day, if we give a little advance, we want to make sure that we're actually making our money back. That's all investment. I mean, and it's, at the end of the day, as you said, they're a bank. They're giving you a loan, or they're basically investing in you. So they're going to protect their interest as much as possible. So with recoupment, as you were saying at the beginning, Tony, marketing, promotion, tour support, recording costs, legal fees, producer costs, all of that. What you want to do is, if you're in a situation like that, you want to make sure that those expenses are recouped out of your future royalties only, not all of the other stuff. And this, again, what we'll talk about with the 360 deal. And if you can push for it, get approval on key expenses that are later will later be recouped. Now, if you're able to do that, you've got a hell of a lawyer.
I was going to say, I love your lawyer, whoever he is. It's hysterical. I mean, I remember being, and again, I'm doing this happened in the 1920s, by the way, when I was signed. But I remember being in a limo going to New Jersey to see New Kids on the Block, right?
Sure.
And, I'm in the limo, and I'm realizing on the way back, I'm talking, and it was one of the label's lawyers, and he turned around to me and he went, "You do realize this limo has probably gone onto your bill?" And I'm like, unbelievable. And at the time, I was like, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be a superstar. And I think about it now and I go, holy crap, how many times did that happen? It's like all the time.
You hope after he dumped you off, he didn't go pick up the head of the label or something, drive around still on your bill, right?
Well, you drove to Atlantic City, I'm sure.
Exactly. No, that's all right. Tony's paying for this. We got the limo.
Put it on Fennel's bill.
Put it on Fennel's bill. Care. Well, and that sort of thing too. When we do publishing on the flip side, as working for a publisher, when we're working with any company where we're getting paid royalties, we want audit rights, and that's another thing you want to push for if you can. Get audit rights to be able to look at statements, even if they're not paying you. You want to know, well, what are you recouping? What are you deducting from my advance? What are you still holding on to, and why? Because if you have the ability to say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to do that anymore. It's like with the Army. The Army will buy a hammer for $450. Why? Because they have a contractor they work with that everybody's getting fat on, and that $450 hammer you could buy at the Home Depot for $10, but it's the Army and they had the contract. So do you want to be able to say, I think I could get that at a better price and do better work for it, but no, we already have our deals in place. We don't want to deal with that. So it's a whole.
That's a great point, John.
Yeah,
well done. That's a really, really good explanation.
Yeah, it's such a wacky situation, and again, it really comes down to it. And the next piece we'll talk about now is 360 deals. This is a great article from an attorney actually who I've dealt with, who's a very, very sharp guy. His name is Steve Gordon Esquire, and he did an article in Digital Music News. This is a little further back now, around 2013, but still very relevant. And this talks about 360 deals. Now, as you were saying, Tony, with a 360 deal, you're basically letting this company, this entity, this label, whatever, take all of your rights, your image rights and everything, and they're basically like the old studio system in Hollywood in the 20s and 30s and 40s. You're signing a contract with them where they basically run the show for you. And, again, as we talked about recently, sometimes it's okay to say, hey, you know what, I don't want to have to do all this grunt work myself. Let them take care of it. But what are you giving up in return? Right? So with that sort of thing, with the 360 deal, not only are they going to claim those rights and handle them for you and potentially, but they're also going to recoup from those rights. So it's not just your music, it's your touring, it's all of the different aspects of your career, including, and as they say now, this really came around. Actually, I was very surprised about this. I thought it was an older sort of storyline, but actually Robbie Williams. You remember Robbie Williams?
I absolutely love that. One of the best untapped English talents over here in the States. They didn't get him. They should have. He was a genius.
Do you know one of the reasons I think he was untapped is that he signed signed one of these deals, and he's sort of the first known artist to do this. He signed a deal like this with EMI in 2002, and I know him only because he did a couple of covers of songs of ours, and I was like, wow, what a voice. I wonder what happened to this guy. And as you know, he sort of went his own way. But they will basically take control of everything, and then all of the expenses that you incur for anything they're going to be taking money out of, and they're going to have a piece of all of your, or anything that can be exploited from you. As I said, your touring and your merchandise and your other rights. The cops are coming to we've said too much, but they're going to be able to take all of that, and again, you're going to have to negotiate what percentage you're willing to split with them on all of those rates, because at the end of the day, you want to say, well, I know that I've sold this number of pieces of merchandise and such, and I know I should be getting this amount back from you. So let's go and let's get it taken care of. And another thing you want to make sure is that they can deliver on all of the things that they say they can do for you. See what their track record is, because what you can do is something, and this was a great little piece, carve out some of those rights. You can do maybe a 270 deal, if you want to call it that, or a 300 deal. If there's certain things you want to hold on to and they really want you can say, well, no, I'll give you all these other rights, but I want to hold on to that, or we do a better deal, something that I have more control over this specific aspect of my career. Because look, here's a perfect example of this. 50 Cent, the rapper, right? He did a deal with Vitamin Water, and actually we were remotely involved with this because we did a deal with Vitamin Water for one of our songs, and it wound up being this complete mess. Of course, what would you expect? But for an advertisement. But he accepted shares in their company in exchange for authorizing the use of his professional name in their Formula 51, right? Yeah. So that when they were sold, Coca-Cola purchased them. He got $100 million for that. Wow. Now, the entity that was in control, they could certainly say, well, wait a minute, you wouldn't have had that deal without us, so we want our cut, right? Yeah. And that had nothing to do with his music. That had nothing to do with it. It was simply the fact that he was this big star, and they wanted his name associated with their product, and they did a branding campaign, as we talked about before, co-branding campaigns and that sort of thing, and it turned into a big payday for him. So there's make sure if you're doing a deal like that, wait, who else gets to participate in this that may have absolutely nothing to do with it, right? I mean, it may not be that they got it for you at all.
There's a lot of people that attach themselves once they see something rolling. That Robbie Williams deal, he got a fortune. I mean, EMI paid him a stack of cash, but this is the same guy that would do 2 nights at Nebworth with 150,000 people plus per night. In England, in Europe, he's still a big deal, a really, really, really big deal. And again, massive talent. The guy wrote the hits with him, Guy Chambers. That guy knows how to write a tune. But, I'll give Robbie one thing, man. He knows how to churn out a good working class lyric. And I'll leave that to his fans or his detractors. I think, personally, the guy's got star quality, he always has. John, we could go on forever and ever and ever and ever with this. And I'd like to do just one on the 360 deal. Really break down to the nuts and bolts of why you should or why you shouldn't sell your soul to the devil, basically. The 360 deal, friend or foe, it's one of those, isn't it? Look, I'd like to thank everybody for listening today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, and you can catch all the episodes on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, InTune Radio, and Stitcher. And you want a little bit more info? Well, check out our website at www.musicmindspodcast.com. Till next time, stay warm out there, John.
You too.
And to everybody else, be good to each other. See you all next time. See you, John.
Take care.